Bonjour, hello, assalamu alaikum. Three ways I greet people on a daily basis living here in Montreal. These are also three languages that I use quite often in my fieldwork, namely English, French, and Arabic, as I learn more about my participants and refugees who have recently moved to Montreal. The title of my presentation is as follows: The Politics of Leisure Spaces, an ethnography of a refugee family adjusting to life in Montreal. And before I jump into my research, I would like to thank the Journal of Emerging Sports Studies for organizing the Power at Play Digital Symposium. I look forward to sharing my research with you all as well as learning more about other researchers' work in this field. My name is Shoaib Hassan Sheikh. I'm a master's student at McGill University. My supervisor is Dr. Jordan Cook, and I thank him every opportunity I get because he's helped me conduct research on a topic that is very dear to me. Also, I would like to note that this project would not be possible without the collaboration of local nonprofit organization Friends for a Cause. I have been working with them since early 2016. They host a number of events every year to help locals such as refugees and the homeless. And if you would like to learn more about them, please go check their Facebook page, Friends for a Cause Montreal. Now, I mentioned my name is Shoaib. I'm a second year master's student at McGill University. And let me describe myself a little bit more so that later on in this presentation, you can better understand my relationship with my participants, how I interact with them, as well as why I interact with them the way that I do. So, I was born in downtown Montreal at this hospital over here. You only see a part of it in this image, but the reason I chose this image is to show you that it's literally a block away from the building at McGill, right over here where I'm doing my master's thesis, the Curry Gymnasium, so they're right next to each other. This cartoon here represents my family who moved here from Pakistan in the 1970s. You see a mosque in this image and people hugging, something we really can't do anymore because of the current pandemic. Local mosques in Montreal have been a huge part of my life growing up. This is where I made a lot of my friends. My parents would take me there to pray, but it was also an area where people would gather to socialize and catch up. Community members would organize events such as picnics, camping, and sports tournaments for everyone to enjoy. So, in today's time, when you think of refugees who come to Canada, and a lot of them being Muslim, they rely on such places to meet others in their new host city. And with COVID 19 restrictions in 2020, these sites are now only being used to go pray, so it becomes difficult for newcomers such as refugees to build social capital and engage in activities that keep their minds and bodies active. Next, here is the first GoFundMe I organized in February of 2016 for Friends for a Cause. With the help of friends and family, we raised right here, as you can see, $205 in less than 12 hours to buy toys for a couple of Syrian children who had just moved to Montreal. Early 2016 was a period when socio-economic, political, and religious conflicts intensified in some parts of the Middle East, and Canada welcomed over 25,000 refugees between December 2015 and February of 2016. This GoFundMe also allowed me to see that by taking initiative and with the help of my friends and family, we can achieve a lot. I continued this type of work in the spring of 2016 when I co hosted a soccer tournament for Syrian and local kids. The idea here was to use sport to foster new friendships and to move away from calling these children refugee children and maybe simply just Canadian so that they feel more at home. That's why, if you see the title of my GoFundMe page, Helping a Syrian Family in Montreal, I kept the word refugee out of the GoFundMe page. So at the time, I was also doing my undergraduate degree in kinesiology at McGill, so it was a great that I could pair together my passion for sports and physical activity with my desire to help people in my community. Next, the more I helped through the years, the more I realized that there was so much that could be done to help refugees better establish themselves in Canada. If we look at the context today, we're looking to increase the annual number of refugees we accept in the country annually. As mentioned in this first um, quote by the Canadian press, Canada does plan to gradually increase the number of refugees it will accept under its humanitarian family reunification and sponsorship programs from 43,000 in 2017 to 51,700 by 2021. Now, with COVID 19, this has slowed down, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make sure that refugees feel at home upon resettling. Now, what do I mean by feeling at home? Well, I'll get back to that in a few slides, but a lot of research in the past 15 years has shown that newcomers who arrive to Canada are healthier than the average Canadian, usually because of strict screening measures, but then the health of these individuals declines over time. This is called the healthy immigrant effect, and in an article by Lewin Ng in 2019, the authors wrote the following. The well-established literature on the healthy immigrant effect finds immigrants to be healthier than the Canadian-born population at their time of arrival, but observes that this health advantage, possibly due to difficulties in adjusting to a new environment, stress, and or adoption of risky health behaviors, diminishes over time. This article specifically talks about immigrants, but the same can be said for refugees who may not be in the best of health because they may be evading traumatic experiences in their home country. And when they do come to Canada, they don't have family they can rely on to adjust to their new surroundings. This brings me to my literature review. So let's tie all this with sports and physical activity. How can sports, recreation, and leisure help newcomers as they resettle? While my literature review starts by looking at European colonizers who used First Nations physical cultural practices to adjust to their new environment in the 17th century. Here in this first image, we see les coureurs de bois, who were French fur traders. And in this image, we see they're using snowshoes for transportation as it made it easier for them to walk long distances in the snow. Next, we have an image of George W. Beers, who is referred to as the father of modern lacrosse. He organized a team of Europeans and First Nations to play against each other and showcase the sport. Not only did this serve as a way to popularize lacrosse, but early settlers competed against First Nations groups in locally derived activities such as lacrosse to claim these activities as their own. So sport, recreation, and leisure have been used by European settlers to adapt the North American climate, but also to foster this new Canadian identity. Taking a look at Montreal specifically and moving into the late 19th century now, here we have the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association, which is Canada's first comprehensive sport and social club. It was brought to existence by the city's English-speaking aristocracy, and they're the ones who typically had access to it. So here we're speaking about businessmen and other professional men, as well as military officers. What I'm trying to get to is that these places of leisure were not open to everyone. Financial and other restrictions seriously hindered the participation of many new and working class immigrants in organized sports and other social clubs, and women were almost always relegated to the proverbial sidelines of such activities. This next building we see is that of the YMCA in Montreal, and this was actually the first YMCA that opened in North America back in 1851. It was open to the city's new immigrant population. However, the organization's mission statement was to assimilate these newcomers who were often seen as deviant. Now, on the other hand, we have Jane Addams Hull House. I'm sure most of you in our field have heard of Jane Addams, a famous social worker who helped build public playgrounds in Chicago's immigrant neighborhoods with the aim of encouraging youth of diverse ethnic backgrounds to to play together in celebration of their cultural differences. Here's a quote by her. America's future will be determined by the home and the school. The child becomes largely what he is taught, Hence, we must watch what we teach and how we live. She encouraged diversity and began the famous playground movement with the motive to break down racial prejudice against immigrant children. A lot can be said about the playground movement that also made its way around Canada and in Montreal. However, scholars in leisure studies have pointed out that some community organizers did not always follow Jane Addams's message and instead saw playgrounds as a space for assimilation. To conclude my literature review, I talk about similar trends in today's society by mentioning the Sport for Development and Peace movement and that community organizers and social reformers have historically used sport, rec, and leisure to assimilate newcomers. In the literature, scholars have also barely given any attention to the recipients of these programs. Their voices and experiences are limited, but can be useful for city administrators looking to use the inclusive properties of physical activity facilities to help newcomers, such as refugees, resettle in their new host country and help them feel a little more at home. Thus, I'll be using critical ethnography as a primary method for my study to really understand the lived experiences of my participants while also considering the contextual factors that could impact their experiences. This book by Dr. Soyini Madison has come in very handy during the first year of my master's degree and has helped me understand the political implications of my study. What this means is that through my thesis, I can add to the literature on this topic, but I can also advocate for changes in my city by seeing what factors promote or inhibit successful social integration and inclusion of newcomers. Now, in terms of additional methods that I'll be using, I also plan on using participant observation, interviewing techniques, as well as textual analysis. I plan to conduct ethnographic fieldwork for a period of 6 months, during which I will be visiting my participants on a weekly basis, and all this in order to explore my primary research question. How does a refugee family conceive and negotiate various sport, recreation, and leisure opportunities during the resettlement process? Earlier in this presentation, I spoke about my involvement with local nonprofit organization Friends for a Cause and how I helped Syrian children and families when they first arrived here in 2016. When I started my thesis a year ago in 2019, I asked the organization if they could help me recruit participants for my study. They helped me get in touch with a refugee family from Chad. Now, you don't hear about Chadian refugees too often in the media today. I wanted to learn more about their background and what led them having to leave their home country. As I'm only halfway through my thesis, I do not have any personal accounts I can share. However, I have learned that Chad is faced with multiple humanitarian problems and has been hosting refugees from neighboring countries since 2003, which has caused tensions between civilians. And here on this map, you can see camps both on the western and eastern borders as well as down south. So in green, these represent camps for internally displaced people, and in red, you have refugee camps. The next image we'll see here is a refugee camp in Kuchagini Mura in eastern Chad, which was newly opened this year to host close to 2,400 refugees. These camps are very simple in design, and the general aim is to have a place for refugees to sleep and provide some order in the region while controlling for diseases. Attention is rarely given to leisure activities, whether structured or unstructured, but even when activities are provided to refugees, researchers have found that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, as untrained staff and fixed rules of conduct really reduce refugees' willingness to participate in any form of physical activity. Now, my participants are two sisters and their respective children who have all moved from Chad to Montreal back in 2018. Once they arrived here in Canada, they had to relocate twice before finally resettling in La Salle, which is a borough in southwest Montreal. They live in separate households not too far from each other, and before I keep talking, let's take a look at what LaSalle looks like. Hey guys, so I'm currently in LaSalle where the families live, the refugee families. Behind me is a bus station. This is an industrial area, so we have a lot of industrial buildings nearby, a couple of water tanks. We also have this Budweiser tank behind me that I'm going to zoom into afterwards. And what else do you have here? Not the greatest vlog, but you get to see that the family is living in an industrial area because they had to relocate twice. And also, because they had to relocate twice in under 2 years, they've had a hard time connecting with the community. And this is even more difficult with the current pandemic limiting social interactions. The family is Muslim, and as I mentioned in the introduction of this presentation, the mosque is not only a place of worship but also a site for people to get to know each other. Since all social activities have been cancelled, the family has relied on visiting local halal butchers to hopefully meet other Muslims who can help them navigate through Montreal. They use a bus as their main mode of transportation, but what surprised me was that they had to pay full transit fares despite the refugee status. The Opus card you see on the right costs over $80, and reduced rates are currently available only to seniors above the age of 65 and students. And both my main participants fall outside of these categories. When refugees first come to Montreal, they don't have a job, and some do not have financial assistance from the Canadian government due to the type of sponsorship program that brought them into the country. In addition, they have to pay over $80 a month to travel around a city that they hardly know about. Perhaps my study can bring light to this transportation issue and other occurrences within the scope of leisure studies which might be impacting refugees' resettlement process. And in conclusion, this is a relatively new topic in leisure studies as scholars have only recently looked to include the voices and lived experiences of refugees. Such research will be useful for club administrators looking to provide more inclusive opportunities for newcomers in various community settings. And with that, thank you for listening and stay tuned for more information.